March 31st, 1993. Brandon Lee had 8 days left of filming. 8 days. And then he was going to be a star. Not just any star. Not another martial arts actor trying to fill impossible shoes. Not Bruce Lee's son playing dress-up in his father's legacy. No, Brandon Lee was about to become something Hollywood had never seen before. The Crow was going to change everything. The buzz was building. The studio knew it. The director knew it. Anyone who saw the dailies knew it. This wasn't just another action movie. This was the role that was going to rewrite the rules. 8 days left, and then a prop gun fired on set. And Hollywood lost something it didn't even know it had yet. This is the story of what almost was, and what should have been, The Shadow. Picture this: 1965, Oakland, California. A boy is born into a legacy so massive, so overwhelming, that it would crush most people before they even tried. His name is Brandon Lee. His father? Bruce Lee. The man who didn't just break into Hollywood, he kicked the door down. Bruce Lee changed everything. He made martial arts cool. He made Asian actors visible. He became a global icon. And then, in 1973, when Brandon was only 8 years old, his father died. Just like that, gone at 32, at the height of his powers. Now imagine growing up in that shadow. Every room you walk into, people see your last name first. Every audition, every role, every conversation starts the same way. Oh, you're Bruce Lee's son? The comparisons never stop. The expectations are impossible. How do you become yourself when the world only sees your father? Brandon tried everything to escape it. He studied acting at Emerson College. He learned different martial arts styles. He even went by Brandon Lee professionally, not Bruce Lee's son. But Hollywood didn't care what he wanted. They saw one thing: a name, a legacy, a marketing opportunity. The early roles came, but they were predictable. Kung Fu, the movie, Legacy of Rage, Laser Mission, action movies trading on his father's reputation. Brandon was good, genuinely talented, but nobody was looking at him. They were looking at who he was related to. And that's a special kind of prison, being famous because of someone else. Being hired not for who you are, but whose son you are. But here's the thing about Brandon Lee. He didn't want to be the next Bruce Lee. He wanted to be the first Brandon Lee. And slowly, painfully, film by film, he was getting there. Showdown in Little Tokyo showed he had screen presence. Rapid Fire proved he could carry an action movie on his own terms. The reviews started changing. Critics stopped comparing. They started noticing. Hollywood was finally starting to see him. Not as Bruce Lee's son, as Brandon Lee, the actor. And then the Crow script landed on his desk, and everything was about to change. The Crow. The Crow wasn't supposed to be a big movie. It was a dark, gothic revenge tale based on an indie comic book. Low budget, risky tone. A director named Alex Proyas, who was relatively unknown. On paper, it was the kind of project studios dumped into February and forgot about. But Brandon Lee read the script and saw something else. He saw a character drowning in grief. A man brought back from the dead to avenge the murder of his fiancée. A soul trapped between two worlds, neither fully alive nor completely dead. This wasn't a martial arts movie. This wasn't an action hero. This was Shakespeare in face paint. Brandon fought for this role. He lobbied hard. He convinced the producers he could do more than kick and punch. He could act. He could carry emotional weight. He could be vulnerable and dangerous at the same time. And when he got the part, he threw himself into it completely. The transformation was total. Brandon trained differently for this. Not just physically, but emotionally. He studied the comic obsessively. He worked with Proyas to understand Eric Draven's pain. He learned to move like a creature caught between life and death, fluid, haunting, otherworldly. When filming started in February 1993, something magical was happening on set. The dailies were stunning. Brandon wasn't just playing Eric Draven. He was channeling something raw and real. The crew watched the footage and knew this was special. This was the kind of performance that gets remembered. The studio started paying attention. Early cuts were screened. Executives who expected a cheap cult film realized they had something bigger. Brandon Lee wasn't Bruce Lee's son anymore. He was a leading man, dark, intense, magnetic. The kind of actor who could anchor a franchise. The kind of presence that opens doors. Offers were already coming in. Bigger budgets, lead roles. Directors wanted to work with him. Brandon was being talked about for projects that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The Crow wasn't even finished yet, and his career was already transforming. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd fought to prove, it was finally happening. He was 28 years old. He was 8 days away from wrapping, 8 days away from post-production, 8 days away from the premiere that would change his life. Hollywood had finally seen Brandon Lee for who he really was, and they wanted more. Then came March 31st, 1993. March 31st, 1993. It was supposed to be a simple scene. Eric Draven walks into his apartment. A gang member fires a gun at him. Brandon's character gets shot, stumbles, falls. Standard action movie stuff. They'd done dozens of scenes like this already. One more setup, one more take. Then they'd move on. The gun was a prop, a .44 Magnum revolver loaded with blanks. Blanks are supposed to be safe. They make noise, they create a flash, but they don't fire projectiles. That's the whole point. Actors point guns at each other all the time. It's movie magic. It can't hurt anyone. Except this time, something was wrong. Weeks earlier, a different scene had required dummy rounds for a close-up shot of the gun. Dummy rounds look real but have no powder. After that scene, someone removed the dummy rounds, but they didn't remove them properly. A bullet tip stayed lodged in the barrel. Nobody noticed. Now, on March 31st, the gun was loaded with blanks for the shooting scene. The actor playing the gang member, Michael Massey, pointed the gun at Brandon and pulled the trigger. The blank fired. The explosive force behind it launched that lodged bullet tip forward. It became a real bullet, and it hit Brandon in the abdomen. Brandon stumbled and fell. The director yelled, "Cut." Everyone thought it was brilliant acting. Brandon sold the impact so convincingly. Then someone noticed he wasn't getting up. He wasn't moving. The set went silent. Then chaos. Paramedics, ambulances, rushing to the hospital. Brandon Lee was in surgery for 6 hours. They tried everything, but the damage was too severe. At 1:04 p.m. on March 31st, 1993, he was pronounced dead. 28 years old. 8 days from finishing his breakthrough role. 8 days from everything he'd worked his entire life to achieve. The news hit Hollywood like a shockwave. Bruce Lee's son, dead on a movie set, the same age his father was. Both gone at the peak of their powers. The coincidence was too cruel, too impossible to process. Production on The Crow shut down immediately. The cast and crew were devastated. Michael Massey, the actor who pulled the trigger, would be haunted by it for the rest of his life. And just like that, Hollywood lost something it had just discovered. A talent that was about to explode. A career that was about to soar. A future that would never happen. 8 days. That's all it would have taken. 8 more days. The aftermath. The Crow should have died with Brandon. That's what everyone thought. How do you finish a movie when your lead actor is gone? How do you release it without it feeling like exploitation? The studio considered shelving it entirely. Just lock it away. Pretend it never happened. Move on. But Brandon's mother, Linda Lee Cadwell, and his fiancée, Eliza Hutton, made a decision. Finish it. Release it. Let the world see what Brandon created. Let his final performance be seen. He worked too hard. He gave too much. This was his moment. Don't take that away from him. So they did something remarkable. Using early CGI, body doubles, and careful editing, they completed the film. They finished Brandon's story. And on May 11th, 1994, The Crow hit theaters. Critics expected a tragedy, a curiosity, a memorial. What they got was something else entirely. The reviews were stunning. Brandon Lee's performance was called haunting, mesmerizing, star-making. He moved like a ghost. He embodied pain and rage with a depth that shocked critics. This wasn't just good. This was extraordinary. The kind of performance that launches legendary careers. Rolling Stone called it a tragic reminder of a talent taken too soon. Entertainment Weekly said Brandon had finally stepped out of his father's shadow, only to be taken just as he arrived. The box office exploded. The Crow made $50 million domestically, more than triple its budget. It became a cultural phenomenon. The aesthetic, the soundtrack, the darkness. It defined a generation's version of cool, and at the center of it all was Brandon Lee, owning every frame he was in. People who'd never heard of him fell in love with his performance. People who'd dismissed him as Bruce Lee's son suddenly understood he was the real deal. But here's what really hurts. The offers that were coming before he died? They multiplied after The Crow's success. Scripts poured in for a dead man, action franchises, dramatic roles, leading man parts in major studio films. Brandon Lee was suddenly one of the most wanted actors in Hollywood. Except he wasn't there to accept any of it. Think about what that means. Brandon spent his entire career fighting to be seen as himself, fighting to escape his father's shadow, fighting to prove he was more than a name. And the moment he finally did it, the moment Hollywood finally saw Brandon Lee the actor, he was gone. The career he'd worked his entire life to build was waiting for him, and he'd never get to live it. Asian representation in Hollywood could have been different. In 1994, there were almost no Asian leading men in mainstream American cinema. Brandon could have been that breakthrough. He had the talent. He had the look. He had the range to do action and drama. He could have opened doors for an entire generation of actors. But that future died with him on March 31st. The roles went to other actors. The franchises found different stars. Hollywood moved on, like it always does. But if you talk to people who knew Brandon, who worked with him, who saw what he was building, they'll tell you the same thing. We lost something massive that day. Not just an actor. A force. A career that could have changed everything. Reflection. Here's the cruel irony that nobody talks about. Bruce Lee died at 32, on the verge of becoming the biggest star in the world. Enter the Dragon was about to explode. Hollywood was finally ready to give him everything he deserved. Then he was gone. 20 years later, his son dies at 28, on the verge of the same thing. The Crow was about to explode. Hollywood was finally ready to see him for who he was. Then he was gone. Father and son, both taken at the peak of their powers. Both 8 days, 8 weeks, 8 steps away from everything they'd fought for. The universe doesn't care about timing. It doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care that Brandon Lee spent 28 years trying to become himself, only to die the moment he finally did. And here's what makes it worse. Brandon's death changed nothing at first. Hollywood kept using real guns on sets. They kept cutting corners on safety. It took decades and more tragedies before the industry really started addressing the problem. Brandon Lee died because someone didn't check a gun barrel properly. That's it. A simple safety check, 5 seconds of attention, and an entire future disappears. But his legacy did something his career never got the chance to do. The Crow became timeless. Brandon's performance is still studied, still referenced, still celebrated 30 years later. People discover it for the first time and can't believe what they're seeing. That magnetism, that pain, that presence. And they wonder the same thing everyone who saw it in 1994 wondered. What would he have become? We'll never know. We'll never see the action franchises he would have anchored. We'll never see the dramatic roles he would have transformed. We'll never see the doors he would have opened for Asian actors in Hollywood. We just have The Crow. One perfect performance. One glimpse of what could have been. One tragic reminder that talent isn't enough. Timing isn't enough. Sometimes the universe just takes. Brandon Lee deserved more. He deserved the career he was about to have. He deserved to step fully out of his father's shadow and into his own light. He deserved to be remembered for a body of work, not a single film. But life doesn't work on deserve, and Hollywood doesn't wait for anyone. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Brandon's legacy deserves to be remembered. Drop a comment telling me which forgotten Hollywood story I should cover next. Thanks for watching.